Mr. Secretary General, António Guterres, it is a great honor for me today to present to you 1/3 of the world banking community represented in this room at the official launch and signing of the Principles for Responsible Banking. Mr. Secretary General, we are very grateful that you have found time in what we know is an extremely busy schedule to be here with us today. And without further ado, allow me now to hand it over to you for your speech to this assembly. Thank you.
Dear members of the responsible banking community, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to join you today on the eve of the Global Climate Action Summit and the General Assembly to launch the United Nations Principles for Responsible Banking. This week, global leaders will share the actions they are taking to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to end the climate crisis. How you as business leaders respond can be a defining moment for our global goals. Only public-private cooperation can deliver sustainable development. And I'm counting on the private sector to support ambitious action. To be objective, I'm witnessing more and more situations in which the private sector is leading, namely in climate change, and governments are still holding back. And so more and more, this relationship has been a relationship driven by the private sector, which I consider extremely important in order to be able to achieve not only effective climate action, but also the Sustainable Development Goals. And the banking sector is responsible for more than 2/3 of all financing globally and 90% in developing countries. And it is in developing countries that you are facing, especially in the least developed countries, the most dramatic challenge in relation to the capacity to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. The recent calculations made by the International Monetary Fund demonstrate that the gap in financing to reach the goals in the least developed countries is indeed out of, I would say, reach from the point of view of the fiscal capacity of those countries. So your actions count, and count in a decisive way. And that is why I ask you for ambitious action in 3 key areas. First, aligning business with the Sustainable Development Goals. With global wealth exceeding $300 trillion, the $2 to $3 trillion gap needed for the Sustainable Development Goals financing seems minuscule. Second, support gender equality. Make more loans available for women-owned businesses and work to ensure women are equally represented where you do business. And it's also important to support small and medium enterprises, many of which are women-owned, because they are the lifeblood of the economy. And my third ask, particularly important today, is to invest in climate action and to disinvest from fossil fuels and pollution in general. Climate action has multiple benefits, including job creation, reduced air pollution, improved public health, and greater security for nations and economics. Given rapidly falling technology costs, investing in renewable energy and energy efficiency makes sense from every angle. To survive as a society, we will need to transform how we grow food, how we use land, how we fuel our transport, and how we power our economies. And we will rely on you to scale up financing to businesses that stimulate green growth. Place your bets on the green economy, not the grey economy, because the grey economy will have no future. The UN Principles for Responsible Banking are a guide for the global banking industry to respond to, drive and benefit from a sustainable development economy. The principles create the accountability that can realize responsibility and the ambition that can drive action. And they will enable banks around the world to align their strategies with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on climate change. When a bank aligns its business with these goals and with the goals of the society, transformational change can take place. The signatory banks that are with us today and the more than 130 around the world that have already committed to the principles for responsible banking have demonstrated strong leadership. And today I call on you to advocate among your peers to sign up to these principles. As you now begin implementing them, set your targets high and wide and match your ambition with innovation. Create new business models and offerings that both drive and respond to the emerging sustainable development economy. As an industry, you can help us succeed in shifting from incremental to exponential progress. You are very powerful partners, and so let us march together to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I thank you very much for your presence, for your commitment, or for the extremely important role that you can play to make those goals that many consider unachievable become a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Secretary General. We have listened to your wise words. At this point, I'm sure that everyone is keen to make that pledge, which will be in the form of a symbolic signing of the principles for responsible banking. The signatory document is in front of you, and what we would like to do, with the photos being taken from various angles, is to invite you at this point to bring and to open the folder that is there. And I would like to invite every one of you in front of the Secretary General of the United Nations and your peers to sign in commitment of the pledge for the principles of sustainable.
I think it would be interesting to have some photos from
here. Yes. Yeah. Can we invite our UN photographers to come up on this side? Hang on with your signatures. So as I think everyone is ready, may I invite you at this point to put pen to paper and the commitment to your business. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And I believe that you have made very valuable signatures. But this, I would say, is of particular value to all of us. Thank you very much.
At this point, allow me to call on Ralph Hammers and Sola David Borja to join me here at the podium to make a presentation on the principles of responsible banking. Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here and to speak on behalf of the signatory banks, the 131 banks that are signing and have signed the principles for responsible banking this afternoon. My name is Ralph Hammers, and I run ING, and often I get asked the question what the future of banking is. And they often ask me this question because, they think about digital and about, branchless banking. But I always give the same answer. The future of banking lays within the purpose of the financial institutions. Just like any other corporation, we're all driven by a purpose. And if you look at the purpose of our collective banks, they're pretty similar. They're pretty similar to the extent that if you really read them, it is about empowering people or businesses to do what they need to do. And within that purpose, we clearly show that we're not servicing a primary need. Nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to have a car loan. People would want to have a car. So we are actually facilitating. We're facilitating people and businesses in realizing what they want to do. And as such, we are facilitating the economies in which we work. We're facilitating these economies to develop in a way that they create opportunities for current generations and future generations. If it comes to education, if it comes to job creation, if it comes to diversity, inclusion, developing businesses, developing infrastructure. And in doing so, living up to our purpose, we do it, and we are pledging today to do that in line with the UN sustainability goals, Sustainable Development Goals. We have a real impact here because we have many clients and we represent a large part of the worldwide economy. We're a group of banks, small and large, coming from 49 different countries. That's how powerful we are. Now, in that development, there's one more thing. We're also corporate citizens. And as a corporate citizen, we feel the moral obligation to also ensure that what we do is in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. So the why we are signing these principles is very clear. The question is, how do we go about the how? How do we do this? And in that one, I think we all will find our own ways. But we all realize that the how is the most important in order to create the impact. And the how is around not so much what you don't do, because it's easy to exclude, honestly. It is about what you do finance. And in what you finance and which client you finance and which client you engage with, that you have that discussion about how this client in his or her sector can actually comply in its business with the Sustainable Development Goals as well as the Climate Agreement. That's where we have the impact. Basically not our primary footprint because we are digital by these days, but our secondary footprint and how we manage that one down. That's the crucial impact that we have. Now, from that perspective, this is kind of a historical moment because we're a good group representing, as said already, more than 30% of banking assets in the world. So we can move the needle. And the leadership gathered here can make a difference. And I think we all can be very proud of taking that on. Now, before I give to Sola, the floor to Sola, one more thing. With this, we do take responsibility. We do take responsibility for how we act in the world, how we act with our stakeholders, and we also have to show accountability. And the principles for responsible banking give us basically a common language as to how we in the future can communicate about our progress and how we do this. That's the important element. But we're only starting. The work is ahead of us. And the work is ahead of us with what we can do as institutions, but I'm also going to call on you to inspire the leaders of the other banks that are not here to join us as well. Because then we can even go faster. Thank you very much, and Sola, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rolf. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As many of you will know, today's launch is a culmination of almost 2 years of intensive discussion, consultation, and negotiation. The core team that has been responsible for developing the principles was first constituted in April last year. We represented 28 banks, and I believe 2 joined very soon after, from all over the world, spanning both developed and developing economies. And I'm really proud to represent our continent, Africa, here today. Working closely with the UNEP FI Secretariat, we consulted with a wide variety of banks, large and small, across the globe, and engaged with a great many other stakeholders, including civil society organizations, banking associations, regulators, and technical experts. Over the past year and a half, we've shared insights and experiences from our own diverse contexts. We've listened to a broad array of views. We've had some very robust debates, and we've learned a great deal. The principles for responsible banking set the global benchmark for what it means to be a responsible bank. They are a firm recognition that banks' indicators of impact and success should be much broader than their financial results. Signatory banks commit to aligning their business strategies with the objectives and targets set out by the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, and other relevant national and regional frameworks. Our objective is to work responsibly with our clients and customers to create shared prosperity for current and future generations. We commit to developing a far clearer understanding of the scope and scale of our impact on society, on economic growth and the environment, and to work proactively to ensure that we maximize the positive impacts of our business activities while minimizing the negative impacts. To ensure that words are backed by action, the signatory banks commit to setting and publishing bank-specific targets, focusing on the areas in which we have the most significant positive and negative impact. We will report publicly on our progress against these targets and will hold ourselves and one another accountable for our progress. We recognize that this is crucial to earn stakeholder trust, protect our social relevance, and ensure our long-term sustainability. And we commit to consulting, engaging, and partnering with our stakeholders, recognizing that the societal goals we aim to achieve require cooperation and collaboration across sectors and geographies. This is a journey which we are just beginning, and we are working towards the achievement of fundamental changes in culture, in behavior, in transparency, and accountability across the global banking sector. So it's a huge task. But we are confident that the principles provide the right way forward for the industry, setting a high but achievable standard against which we invite our stakeholders to hold us to account. There will be those who will argue that we're not moving fast or far enough. But we've been very clear that to be meaningful and impactful, this initiative needs to resonate across the industry and across national borders. So we've taken a deliberately measured approach, precisely because we want as many banks as possible to join us. We recognize that different institutions will begin the journey from vastly different points, and our objective is to be inclusive and supportive, and to work together to achieve a scale of change far greater than could be achieved by a smaller number of institutions working in isolation. On behalf of all the founding signatory banks, I'd like to encourage our stakeholders to join us on this journey. Please hold us to account, but also engage us constructively and proactively in finding new and creative ways to work together, to face the challenges facing our planet, and to ensure that we all contribute towards a more sustainable and socially relevant way of doing business. We recognize that it takes more than putting pen to paper to make a global agreement on responsible banking a reality. But today marks a very important starting point. The principles provide a trustworthy and credible framework to transform the industry into a leading player in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, benefiting society as a whole, not only for this generation, but for generations to come. Thank you.
We've heard two powerful speeches by two of your representatives, speaking, I'm sure, on behalf of all, on the commitment to the principles of responsible banking and for a long, deep horizon vision of where the banking sector can journey in the context and alongside sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals that we have all agreed. So allow me then, on my side, to thank everyone who is here today and to encourage that what you have signed today will become a living document in your industries and in your businesses. These principles, as you know, have been developed by UNEP and with a core group of 30 banks from around the world, many of which, of course, are represented here today. They guide banks as they strive to align themselves with the Sustainable Development Goals and with the Paris Agreement on climate change. The Secretary General, in being here earlier on, is a signal of his commitment to you, as well as yours to him, in the implementation of the principles that you have signed. And the presence earlier of the Secretary General ahead of the Climate Action Summit also demonstrates that these principles have the potential to transform the global economy, because we desperately need that transformation to help address three challenges which will hold humanity back from the potential and from a brighter future for all. And the first challenge, obviously, on the eve of the summit, I have to name, is climate change. Leading economists have referred to climate change as being the greatest market failure in human history. If unchecked, climate change could lead to a loss of 5 to 20% of global GDP per year. It's already damaging the well-being, the economic development, and the financial stability of current and future generations. The summer heat waves, the fires, the inundations, the droughts, the failed harvests, each of these are testament to what we are doing to our planet. But this summer was just a taste of a wider menu of climate impacts, from extreme weather to rising seas. In a sense, when we do not take care of nature, nature will send us invoices. And these invoices come in the form of droughts, fires, inundations, etc. But the solutions are within our grasps. Investment in renewable energy are beginning to edge out fossil fuels. The Global Trends in Renewable Energy Investment Report found that investments in renewable energy capacity from 2010 to the end of 2019 is likely to hit $2.6 billion. Who would have, trillion. Who would have thought that just 10 years ago? In 2017, renewables avoided an estimated 2 billion tons of CO2 emissions. So just imagine the impact that we could deliver if we shift even more investments away from fossil fuels and towards renewables. We can slow climate change. We can create sustainable jobs, bring clean and renewable energy to communities across the world. So yes, that first challenge that I put to you is indeed climate change. But the second challenge that I'd like to put to you, and I mentioned that to some of you earlier today, is ecosystem and biodiversity loss. As we convert land to agriculture, as we must to feed the 800 million people that go to bed hungry, as we expand our infrastructure and our urban expansion, we damage the natural foundation that makes prosperity possible. We already today use 72% of the planet's ice-free surface to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. So as we expand into that surface, there are clear consequences. And we have destroyed ecosystems and habitats, and now we are facing potential loss of at least 1 million out of 8 million species on Earth. So the second point that I wish to raise for you as a challenge is indeed ecosystem and biodiversity loss. But again here, solutions are within our reach. We can restore the 2 million hectares that are lying degraded. We can ensure that we can bring generations of agriculture back. We can ensure that we can generate about 9 trillion in ecosystem services by 2030. Society is ready for this. Restoration is an obvious opportunity. Restoring degraded lands can but be a success story to all. The third challenge that I wish to highlight is pollution of the land, of the air, and of the sea. These pollutants from our transport, from our industry, and from our agriculture place a huge economic burden on the healthcare system, on the productivity of labor, and of cleanup that we have to do. And here again, we do know what to do. Again, like renewables, which is beginning to show a success story, we know what to do around pollution. We have to think about circularity. We have to think about that circular economy. A recent study by the Food and Land Use Coalition found that investing in reforming food systems would also cut pollution. So there are real opportunities. And so these opportunities, these investments would benefit business, societies, but also certainly the bank themselves. So we need to change course, and we have to follow through with the conviction of the Paris Agreement and Agenda 2030 in mind. That is why the principles of responsible banking and their framework are so important. You, 130 banks, collectively holding $47 trillion in assets, have signed up to these principles. You represent 1/3, as we heard, of the global banking sector. And as founding signatories, you acknowledge that only in an inclusive society founded on human dignity, equality, and the sustainable use of natural resources can your clients, your customers, and your businesses thrive. So the principles are not merely words. They are supported by a strong implementation framework that has set clear accountabilities. That includes ambitious target setting in areas of greatest sustainable development impact and transparency through public reporting. We now have the commitment and the means to change everything and spark a transformation of the entire banking system. Because we know that banks are not resilient to climate change, banks are not resilient to pollution, and banks are not resilient to ecosystem loss. Because we know that when you respond to the demands of the young and the growing population who want their money to work for the planet, you will see your client base rise. So, ladies and gentlemen, we should not pretend that the task ahead of us will be quick and easy. We're talking about fundamental system-wide shifts. But UNEP is well positioned to work with you, to guide you where you feel you need that guidance, and to work with the wider financial sector through this transition, with the principles serving at the heart of our work. I am deeply grateful to each one of you, and I welcome the personal commitment that more than 100 bank CEOs, including 40 of you who are here with us today, have made. I will do my part to ensure that this leadership that you have demonstrated is reciprocated by my institution and by the United Nations as a whole. We're counting on you as you drive real transformational change. Your clients are counting on you. The young people in the summit yesterday are counting on you. The planet is counting on you. And I look to celebrating many successes with you in the years to come. Thank you. So at this point, there's a transition, and I would like to invite the Christiana Figueres. But before I do, let me thank and give deep thanks to both Ralph Hammers as well as Sola David Borja for their intervention and speaking on behalf of all for the commitment and the aspiration that each of you expressed. Thank you very much. Give them a round of applause. So I would, at this point, like to call on the CEOs from the 5 world regions who will speak on the principles for responsible banking and what they will mean and achieve in each of their regions. And I would like to invite the panel members, you will kindly introduce them, Simone, to join us here so that we can hear from each of the regions. Over to you. Micro.
Okay, perfect. Can I invite Guy, Carlos, Christos, Konehadi, and Norihiko to come join us up here, please? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Simone Dettling. I lead UNEP FI's banking team. And my team and I have had the privilege to support the 30 banks that have led the development of these principles for responsible banking over the course of the last 18 months. We are very proud to today be launching these principles with 130 banks from every corner of the world, jointly representing 47 trillion, and with that, over a third of the global banking industry. We believe and we hope that this will be the start of a new era for a sustainable banking sector that supports society in achieving the goals it has set for a sustainable future. The principles for responsible banking will guide each of you, each of your banks, in aligning your business with and massively scaling up your contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals and the goals set out in the Paris Agreement, the global goals that humanity has set for its future. Now, while the principles for responsible banking are a global framework, their implementation will be specific to the context of each bank. These principles they require each bank to focus where it matters most, where it can have the greatest impact on the most significant challenges and objectives of the society it serves. So I have with me here bank leaders from all 5 world regions, and together we want to explore how the principles for responsible banking will guide banks in different regions, in different parts of the world, in contributing to achieving the key objectives and tackling the key challenges of their regions. So I have with me, representing North America, Guy Cormier from Desjardins, CEO of Desjardins in Canada. From Latin America, I would like to welcome Carlos Gonzalez. He is the chairman of Banorte in Mexico. For Europe, we have Christos Megalou, who's joining us from Greece as the CEO of Piraeus Bank. I have to my right here, Konehadi Gugushe, who's the acting CEO of the Land and Agricultural Development Bank of South Africa, and will represent her region. And Asia Pacific is represented by Norihiko Kato, who's the CEO of Gollumd Bank and who has come all the way from Mongolia to be with us here today. Welcome. So let me start in Latin America, Carlos. I think not just for the environmental community, but for people worldwide, it's quite shocking to see the pictures of a burning Amazon. How are banks responding to the destruction of the Amazon, but also other ecosystems in the region? And what more can banks do to respond to this challenge, especially in the light of today's commitment?
Sure, thank you very much. First of all, it's an honor for me to be here and being able to talk to you and address this very important issue that is going on in the world, and that we feel very proud not ignoring it as a bank. I think that is the first thing we have to do, to recognize the need in banking, the value of natural capital as a crucial asset for the well-being of the people. We first have to recognize the risks that we have if we don't recognize those issues. In Latin America, in the Caribbean region, I think it is an extremely rich in biological diversity region. We have 60% of our land and marine life over the planet in our territory. Mexico, where we have our operations in Banorte, is the fourth most diverse country in the world. And it is very sad to say that 50% of our flora and fauna is qualified as endangered. We have a very important challenge of balancing economic development with the recognizing the conservation of the region's natural capital. We definitely don't want to witness again those devastating fires in the regions or anywhere else in the world. Banks in Latin America, we have to recognize the value of natural capital, as I was mentioning in the beginning. The principles precisely for responsible banking provide us with the framework to align our businesses to do the sustainable development goals. And our commitment as signatories implies a new way of doing business, establish new goals and targets to maximize the positive impact of our products and services, and to minimize the social and environmental risks in our financing activities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. Let's move a bit further north to North America, Guy. Fossil fuel extraction is a big topic in North America. How will the principles for responsible banking, I know not an easy question, influence how banks in North America finance the energy sector?
Well, thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. A real pleasure, a real privilege to be with all of you. Yeah, it's sure that in North America, there's a production of 23 million barrels per day of oil, and represent around 23% of the worldwide production. So there is more than 1.6 million people who works in the oil and gas industry. So it's sure that we will have to accompany them properly in the next few years to continue to disinvest carefully and proactively in fossil fuels and accelerate investment in more efficient energy sources. That's the way North American Bank will have a huge impact on this industry. And I think the principle, I'm totally convinced of the fact that the principles will help us by 3 to 4 specific actions that we'll integrate in our activities. First, accelerate the reduction of the carbon footprint of the financial institution, actually in our own investment portfolios. That's something that we will probably continue to do so. Develop also new capacities in helping the companies, SMEs and companies that we're doing business with, to help them to manage their own transition and to understand the risks and the opportunities that are offers with climate change, and how we can help them not only by loans but also by any kind of financial products to make them not only happy but at least that they want to be more proactive in these kind of investments. And the third one is the fact that we will be able, with this new economy in front of us, to invest in low-carbon economy in a range of new promising sectors. Yes, renewables, but energy efficiencies, clean technology, smart mobility. There's new areas that our banks, our financial institution can invest in. At the end of the day, I'm totally convinced that we can have a huge impact as leaders, strong leaders in our economy, because most of us are systemic in our countries, so we can change the way some of our clients are managing their own companies.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Guy. So it's very much about working with the clients, working with those people in the country that are affected by the transition. With that in mind, let us move to Asia Pacific, to you, Norihiko. I think it is the world region where 2/3 of humanity live. It has 2/3 of the world's population, so much of our future will be decided there. It also has some of the world's most crucial ecosystems, unfortunately with biodiversity in decline. Norihiko, what do you see as the key environmental challenges for your region? How are banks currently related with their financing to those challenges, and how do they need to change working with their clients to jointly address these?
Thank you, Simone. It's an honor to be here to representing Asia Pacific. It's such a big region, the largest population, and producing the greenhouse gas the most, and the biological diversity also we have. And the big country, developed country to a very rapidly developing country, and also the very less developed and also island states. Such a diverse region is Asia. And poverty reduction, inclusion, and social issues are also facing Asian region. And the many countries are now currently rapidly growing. The biggest challenge for environmental issue is that how we really are integrate the sustainability into the development. And people are a bit busy for the development, fast economic growth. And they are not necessarily routinely can feel or aware of the importance of this sustainability. So the education and awareness and the very variety of countries are included in this region. We communicate each other among the countries. And this big challenge of rapid growth and sustainability's integration is really we need to share our knowledge and use the latest technology to make it available for the less developed countries. And such a region need really the developed countries and less developed countries work together. And that's, I think, the key.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Norihiko. So really too much focus on fast economic growth, but not so much on sustainability. Let's take that to Africa. Kunihadi, Africa is also a region with significant development challenges. It has the fastest growing population in the world. So from your perspective, what are the key social, economic, environmental challenges for the continent, and what role do you see for the African banking industry in tackling them?
Thank you, Simone, and good afternoon, everybody. I must express that it is an honor and a pleasure to be here today. I think Africa experiences a number of social, environmental challenges that really at the heart of it affect the ability of people to generate their own livelihoods. So firstly, I'll talk about unemployment, underemployment, which becomes, while Africa does have the fastest growing population, what we are not able to do is to generate enough employment to absorb the workforce that we have, youth unemployment in particular, estimated to be at about 30%. Now, 30% means that a third of your people are not working. A third of your people that are able and willing to work are not working. And because even the employment that is there becomes either informal or casual, it also then becomes insecure. When you've got insecure employment, then it makes it difficult to plan. It makes it difficult to invest in the things that you need to. So as financial institutions, it's important for us to look at ourselves and say, how do we respond appropriately to the challenges that are facing ourselves uniquely? How do we respond appropriately to really becoming a catalyst for small business development, for creating opportunities of employment for those people that we need to? We talk about climate and climate change, and this is something that really resonates very closely with me, with the Land Bank being an agricultural development bank. About 5 years ago in 2015, we saw the worst drought recorded in history, and what we are seeing at the moment is that what we took for granted as agricultural seasons is things that have shifted. While now we see that rains are coming 6 to 8 weeks late, it means that we are not able to plan appropriately. It means that we are not able to schedule either the financing that we are supposed to do, but also it affects the yields that are fetched by those farmers that we support and so on. So climate change is not something that is up in the air, that is not being experienced. It is practically being felt, not only by our clients, but also by us as financiers. So it then becomes important for us to really try and support the people that we work with to say, how do they adjust their practices such that we can respond and contribute to a more sustainable future? How do we adjust the things that we finance? Because by making financing available, you can then entrench a much better behavior. You can entrench a much better investment being made by people. Africa has less developed infrastructure, and the kind of infrastructure that we as financiers invest in or provide financing availability for will also determine the future and how we are then able to make sure that as we are trying to develop our countries, we are doing so in a responsible manner. We are doing so in a manner that ensures the sustainability of our future and future generations.
Okay, thank you very much, Konehari. So unemployment, youth unemployment, informal employment, changes in seasonality affecting farmers, but also making sure that infrastructure is planned in a sustainable way. Can you give a few examples how you feel banks in Africa can make substantial contributions to these three challenges that you named?
As I indicated, banks, the role that banks play is really becoming a catalyst to development, making available funding in a most appropriate manner. So where you have funding that is incentivized, for example, for renewable energy, where you have funding that is incentivized to get our clients to adopt more sustainable methods of farming practice, there is a drive for mechanization because it improves efficiency and productivity. However, we need to make sure that we don't do this at the expense of employment, and therefore we need to encourage either manufacturing, small businesses to really thrive. And by the financing that we make available, I feel that we can really do this.
Okay, thank you very much. So incentivizing, nudging clients, but with a balance. Let's go to Europe here, Christos. Incentivizing, nudging clients, is that something that European banks are looking into? And if so, what are the areas that you're planning to focus on? What are the areas where you feel banks in Europe can really make a significant difference?
Thank you. Thank you, Simone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real honor to be here with all of us today to commit to the principles for responsible banking. Well, in Europe, we are in the forefront of the transition to a low-carbon economy. And of course, the banking industry voluntarily, also with this initiative, is supporting this transition. There is a need for collective initiatives, and this is what we are doing now to amplify the efforts that individual banks are doing, and all of the banks being here in the panel and here with all of us are doing the same. We are focusing on the principles to have guidance for the banks, to create value for our customers, our shareholders, and the society. It's a global framework. It's a framework that will allow us to integrate sustainability across all business areas of the bank, starting from the strategic to the portfolio and then to the transaction level. And this is what we are inspiring, and this is how we will be able to disseminate all this effort through from our systems down to our employees and down to our customers. One word on Europe. Europe has pledged to become climate neutral by 2050. To meet this objective and the Paris Agreement objective, we need an additional 180 billion euro to finance policies and investments for a low-carbon economy. We have the EU Action Plan for Sustainable Growth, and we have introduced legislation and guidelines in order to reorient capital flows towards these sustainable investments. So we are enabling the players in the industries in order to enhance sustainability. And that, we think, as banks, is a very, very important role.
Okay, thank you very much, Christos. I think you have emphasized something very important, and that is elevating sustainability to the strategic level, which is one of the key features of these principles. Carlos, thinking about Banorte's strategy, and at the same time thinking about one challenge that Latin America really faces, which is inequality. How can you adjust your strategy to address inequality and make a contribution to a more equitable future in Mexico and wider Latin America?
Sure, thank you very much. First of all, I think it's very important to say, as you were mentioning, inequality has been undermining the growth of Latin America for a long time. Inequality has been a threat to the growth of countries all over Latin America and Mexico. And if we just analyze the numbers, what the global index has given us, is that more than 40% of the people that live in Latin America don't have access to financial services. That means it's close to 200 million people that do not have access to financial services. In Mexico alone, more than 50% of our population does not have access to a financial institution. So I think for us as banks, and specifically in Banorte, we take this very seriously. Our role is a very important role that can and should allow to transform the growth for the GDPs of our countries by bringing financial services closer to the marginalized populations. And one very specific thing that we take very seriously at Banorte, and all our banks in Latin America are doing so, and we must do so, is first of all to recognize that we have not only a responsibility to our shareholders or to our collaborators, the people that work with us, but we have a very, very important compromise with society. And that compromise with society must take us closer and change our strategy, as you were mentioning, Simone, and in order for us to focus into being able to bring these financial services closer to these marginalized communities. We have a very important tool now that we can use, which is technology. Technology is now a big ally for us and has to be a big ally in order for us to bring financial services to these types of marginalized communities. I think the more we can contribute as banks, as financial institutions, into bringing financial services to marginalized regions, we will be working together and helping and giving our grain of salt in order for our countries to reach the levels of growth and reduce the problem of inequality that we have. Okay. I think the principles of banking that we're signing right now should give us a very good line of work in that sense.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks very much. So bringing financial services closer to underserved populations is one of the solutions for addressing inequality. Norihiko, let's take that to Asia. I think also there, a lot of the population does not have access to financial services. How do you see banks in Asia addressing inequality, maybe not just in terms of income, but also in terms of gender?
Gender. Well, the inclusive financing is pretty much developing quickly in Asia now. And there's still, the woman, the gender equality is not really included or accomplished yet. So the business leaders are men-dominated, and the women business are facing difficulty to borrowing from the financial institutions. Of course, the microfinance and those are international agencies' supports are making a success, I think, for women's support. But there are still a lot to do.
Okay, taking the women to North America, Guy, but also maybe looking at other social issues that are relevant in your region. How do you see Desjardins playing a stronger role in addressing a number of key social challenges?
Well, probably Desjardins, but also all the other North American banks too. There's many challenges in North America. Maybe two that I want to concentrate on. The first one is income inequality and poverty. Poverty is relative. We maybe think that, or we're all convinced that North America is perceived as one of the most prosperous places in the world. But at the same time, there is still poverty and there's still inequality. And financial institutions will have a key role to play to fight these challenges. And there's one specific area that at Desjardins, but also I think a lot of financial institutions are working on, is education. How can we be more proactive, present in the educational system? How do we encourage kids to stay in school? It could be award scholarships, could be programs, investing in some programs with universities, college. It could be also just supporting educational platform. So how can we be more proactive as financial institution to contribute to a better educational system? It's one way to fight against inequality and poverty. And in our own financial institution, there's a second challenge that we should do better, is diversity in the place of women. Actually, more than half of the workforce in our financial institution are women, but less than 20% are in the senior management team, are in the C-suite. So we have to find new solutions to encourage groups that help women to network together, to have access to mentor, share examples of female role models that can bring to our women that are working for our financial institution to have to harness the potential that they can achieve. And men need also, our men who works in our financial institution need also to promote and create conditions that will contribute to see more women to have access to senior management, executive departments. So set targets and be more proactive to achieve it.
Absolutely. Speaking of target setting, Christos, the key mechanism of the Principles for Responsible Banking is to set targets where the bank can really have the most significant impact. And invariably, that will be in the bank's core business. So when you think about European banks, in which core business areas and on which topics would you expect them to set targets?
One word before that.
Yeah.
Just to say, the principles, it's for banks, and especially banks in Europe that, over the crisis years have been, in a way, kind of in a difficult position, is a first-class opportunity to re-establish the role of the banks in society and showing that the banks are responsible and they are really placing society at the heart of our activity. So that is a very important element that we should take into account. In terms of action plans, there have been legislative and non-legislative proposals and measures, taxonomy, benchmarks, non-financial disclosures, and investors will be able then to make decisions on sustainability and making sure which bank does what. But the sectors that we think that in the forefront of our effort, they should be renewable energy, energy savings and climate change mitigation projects, electric cars, green buildings, waste, water, environmental technology, forestry, agri-food, and these are areas where Europe plays a very big role in the transition to a low-carbon economy. We need to place all of this into the heart of the strategy and the implementation of each bank and create the structure that will disseminate that to all employees, and at the end of the day, this is going to be making the difference in Europe, but also globally.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christos. I think to summarize a bit, so for Europe, we hear that the low-carbon economic transition is a key issue that European banks can contribute to. For Latin America, I think we hear that natural capital is crucial for the well-being of people. And it is a matter of recognizing and understanding the interconnections, and that inequality undermines growth currently, and banks can play a key role in addressing that by providing access to more financial services for people who don't have that at the moment. I think for Africa, we hear very clearly the challenge of unemployment, especially among youth, of decent employment. And I think for Asia, we hear there has been a focus on fast economic growth, but maybe less of sustainable growth. And there is a huge need for transferring technology, and that's something that banks can support. And I think, Guy, for North America, I think it's become clear that it's really about helping companies to transition and helping people cope with the transition. So I think that gives us a quite interesting view of the challenges and the potential roles we have for banks across different regions. While this panel is about the regional aspects, I do think it is interesting to take a moment to think about, well, implementation is going to be region-specific, but why is it nevertheless important to have a global framework, a global language, a global vision for the banking industry? And maybe Norihiko, we want to start with you here.
Yes, the principle framework is so important. And in Asia, developing countries typically are the people's awareness, even in the banking industry or any stakeholders, in order to speak up the importance and appeal the importance of sustainability. Having the principle or not is a very big difference. And this framework is universal. The planet Earth doesn't have a country border, and one country's efforts doesn't solve the problem. So the Asian countries, as fast growth what we are making, we should really need to increase awareness, and everybody think, taking into this sustainability, whenever do the big economic activities, that is really the critical and first point, and the principle which really help to increase awareness of any stakeholders in the region. That will help our business too.
Okay, thank you very much. Kunihadi, why is a global framework crucial?
Thank you. So while I agree that implementation is important for it to be regional, because each region has to respond to the particular challenges that it is faced with, and it has to design its own solutions. A global framework allows you to learn from each other, which I think is a very important part of making sure that there's at least some level of certainty in terms of what is expected to be done. There is, the saying that says, what gets measured gets done. That accountability of setting targets, specifying certain actions that you are going to take, and then measuring that as you go along the way, and the transparency of being able to report that such that you can then have a certain community that holds you accountable to what you have committed to. I think it's a very important part of it that as the banks that are here, not only do we just give our commitment, but we also then have an accountability leg to it. And I think lastly, it is important because ultimately it brings standardization, and it brings a certain oneness within the different regions that you're in. So a global framework allows you to then speak a common language, so that we can all be able to strive towards the same thing. Because when we don't, we could be just pulling across one another.
Okay. So really a common language and a learning from each other. That does bring me to my last question. Today, it is 130 banks signing a commitment, but at the same time, this is a start of an alliance between the United Nations and the global banking industry. So in the spirit of common language and learning from each other, what do you expect from the UN, and what can the UN expect from you? Guy?
Well, I think the UN is already helping us to work together and bring around the table maybe not all the players around the globe, but at least many, many players around the globe. Will help us to promote an ongoing dialogue, shared best practices with all the colleagues in this room, and maintain a bar where we will have year after year to follow the trend and try to be better and better and better. So I think UN, for this reason, is really helpful for us. At the same time, the financial institution will have to be more transparent. We'll have to be to collaborate together, to cooperate together, to share best practices, but maybe to be in touch all together. Maybe not to look at us as competitors, but sometimes to look at us as really cooperators, to see if we can work as one team, and to set for us ambitious goals, ambitious plans that will help us to at least follow the road, follow the path, and attain or achieve what we want to achieve.
All right. I like this image, working as one team. Carlos, working as one team with your peers, with the UN, what do you expect from both going forward?
I think it's very important to recognize that what the UN does is address the most important issues and challenges that the world have. So I feel very proud and honored to be with all my peers and colleagues here and listening to Guy, and also what Ralph was saying, that what we're doing here right now is recognizing that we have a challenge, a problem in the world, that we as financial institutions can work together. I like what Guy was also mentioning, that we can work together and not always be looking at us as competitors, because we are recognizing that we can do a difference and make a difference in the world. I think also what the Secretary General was mentioning at the beginning, it's the only way we can address and be efficient in getting results in challenges like this is by private and public associations. So I think what we're living right now, and I feel very honored to be able to be a part of this, the association between the UN and the financial institutions of the world, in order for us to work towards a specific challenge that we are all recognizing. I think it's something that will our children will be thankful, and I think we take not only the homework that we need to apply this in our regions, but also, as Ralph was mentioning in the beginning, that we need to convince the rest of the industry that is not represented here right now to be a part of this alliance.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think wonderful points towards the end. So really, the principles for responsible banking are addressing key challenges in your region in the way that is needed for your region, but they're also very much about learning from each other and about understanding that together we can really make a difference in the world. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're drawing to the close of what has been a busy and inspiring event to launch the Principles for Responsible Banking. Please allow me to thank all of our speakers, from the UN Secretary General António Guterres, UN Environment Executive Director Inger Andersen, and the 7 fantastic CEOs from around the world, bringing in their experience and their desire to work together in addressing some of the largest challenges we face globally. I think the profile of these speakers and of the many influential people in this room speaks clearly to the potential and the ambition of the principles. It also speaks to the momentum behind putting them into practice, and I think it's quite important, as we're hearing. These principles are not just words. They define an overarching vision of a new era of responsible banking. One based on the understanding that banks can only strive in a stable, peaceful, and affluent societies. One based on the deeper understanding that we cannot have such societies without a healthy planet, free from the threats of climate change, from polluted air, from ecosystem loss. Without healthy communities, without decent work and respect for the individual. A new era of responsible banking whereby banks see for themselves an integral role in realizing sustainable development outcomes, in financing the needs of society, simply put. So I'm convinced that this impressive initial coalition of 130 banks from all 6 continents, jointly representing, as we hear, over a third of global banking assets, can spark a transformation in the global banking industry. Now, ladies and gentlemen, much hard work lies ahead in fanning this spark, in turning the principles into a tool for organizational and even systemic change. But I think first I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the effort and commitment that has brought us here. And when we talk about the principles, we often refer to this core group of 30 banks, the founding banks that have led to their development, and in reality is a core group of individuals within these banks who drove the process. A group willing to raise their heads above the parapet and advocate for something they believed in, both within their organizations and across their industries. When they started down this road, success was definitely far from certain. To get such a huge share of the banking industry on board is testament to their patience and their persistence. They've dreamed, they planned, they cajoled, they badgered, and made themselves exactly the kind of nuisance the world needs right now on so many levels, from the streets to the boardrooms to the elected office. So yes, this is a collective effort. We all have a lot of work to do, but these individuals deserve some specific recognition. Therefore, I would like to ask all those from the core group who are here today if they could rise. Please, not the banks, the working group members. They're not all present. I believe we can put up on the screen the list of names involved, and I ask you if you could thank you. And I would also like to give a special thank you to the CEOs that you've given your team, you've inspired them, you've given them room to essentially to say, go and work on this thing that sounds a little bit strange, work together, tell me if it makes sense, and you've given them the backing, and that's brought you here today, and this is only the beginning. Okay, so thank you very much. Now we must turn to what comes next, and I think to make this transformation effective will not be easy. To build the capacity to identify sustainable development impacts, to set business targets, to deliver them at scale, and to be accountable for progress is not simple. Implementing the principles for responsible banking and sparking change will be a challenge for every signatory. But as of today, as we've heard on this recent panel, you're part of a global coalition working towards the same goals. You will learn from each other, advance together, jointly develop solutions, and tackle the challenges that will come with this journey. You will no doubt also compete, as climate action and the Sustainable Development Goals will require trillions of dollars in financing, and the first movers into this space will become the leading responsible banks of tomorrow, when the term responsible maybe is even no longer needed, as it's a given. True leadership will mean moving from the opportunistic to the strategic, from business case to business imperative. It's no longer enough to buy a few green bonds or to issue them, or make a few renewables investments and say that you are green and ready for the changes ahead. The progress going forward will be about a fuller scale institutional realignment with sustainable development. Scaling up the green, but also turning down the brown and having the leadership, the culture, the management, the products, and the full value chain needed to turn the ship. 1/3 of the global banking industry believes, starting today, that the principles for responsible banking are a tool for navigating their way forward. We in the UN are here to support you, to guide you, and facilitate your advancement as a group and as an industry. We look forward to working with you, and again, thank you to all of the CEOs who have shown up today, all of the representatives from all 130 banks, UN representatives, and all participants to this event. I hope to see many of you tomorrow, where we'll have a full day to dive into the implementation of principles, with many of the CEOs will be speaking, but also quite a number of technical sessions to go into the details of how we're going to get there. So thank you very much, and good continuation. Let's get started. That's it for today. Thank you very much. I would call the core group of individuals. We will be taking a photo. The ones who I had mentioned, we'd like to thank afterwards if they could stay back. But for everyone else, thank you very much for today. And we look forward to working together.